Hey everybody, Max from Baltimore Spirits Company here. Welcome to a long-awaited next episode of Finer Things, the show where we talk about spirits and spirits-adjacent topics from around the world. You may notice things look a little bit different in here. Things look a little bit better, cleaner, more professional, one might say. Well, we've moved the studio into the new cocktail gallery, and I apologize for the delay in videos, but it's been a long project and I'm excited to get back to it. So we're going to jump right in. Today, we're talking about Pimms, a classic English gin liqueur. So let's roll credits. It's Pimms o'clock. Pimm's #1 cup. Invented by James Pimm sometime between 1823 and 1840 in London. James Pimm was the son of a farmer. He was an educated man, and after his education, he opened Pimm's Oyster Warehouse. There were a lot of oyster places in London at the time, and very common to an oyster place would be to have a summer cup, which is some sort of liqueur. It's a digestif. You drink it after eating oysters because oysters are disgusting.
I like oysters.
Nobody likes oysters.
Everybody likes oysters.
It's a digestif that you drink after oysters to aid in digestion, and not because oysters are terrible and disgusting, but because they were really just looking for some excuse to drink alcohol. We still do it today, even though it's not under the guise of digestion. But it does have some traditional medicinal botanicals in it, most notably quinine, so probably made with cinchona bark, although it's still a secret recipe. We'll get into it. But he invented it between 1823 and 1840 in his oyster warehouse. It became very, very popular, so much so that he stopped referring to it as the summer cup, and it became the Pimm's cup. The secret recipe remains a secret today. I don't believe it's made the exact same way. It does say it's made with caramel coloring, so you can rest assured that something has changed from 1840. But how much of that really only Diageo knows, and I don't think they're going to share it with me, as they haven't shared it with anybody for almost 200 years now. So after 1840, Pimm's Cup is blowing up. He starts licensing the Summer Cup to other oyster places. By 1859, it's being sold by bike messengers and bike hawkers all around London, as well as being sold in many different oyster bars. You've got British royalty eating in the Pimm's Oyster Warehouse just because of the kind of famous Pimm's Cup. By 1859, it's so popular, it's being sold all over London by bike messengers, bike hawkers. It's being sold in other oyster warehouses and oyster bars. British royalty is eating at the Pimm's Oyster Warehouse because the Pimm's Cup is so famous. After a few more years, in 1865, James Pimm gets out of the game and he sells the brand to Patrick Sawyer. Patrick Sawyer just kind of looks after the brand for about 5 years. He's not involved in it very much. I think it more or less continued to operate as it did, and he sold it to Horatio Davies. And Horatio Davies is really the guy that's credited with growing this into an international kind of world-known brand, at least in that part of the world. So Europe and really kind of all over the British Empire, but not really the Americas yet. Horatio Davies is really the guy who's credited with turning Pimm's from a local English brand into more of a worldwide phenomenon. And he's a quintessential Englishman. He was certainly an imperialist. He notably decorated his home with artifacts from other countries from all around the world, very British museum, if you know what I mean. He even had a gold bowl that at one point was the property of the last sovereign king of Burma, very British museum, if you know what I mean. And he used the British Empire much to his advantage. He used his connections in the British government to send Pimm's to all the colonial settlements that Britain had all over the world, specifically for the soldiers. So it became part of the soldiers' rations. They were all given Pimm's, and this is kind of the way Pimm's proliferated into other countries, into Africa, into East Asia, all over Europe as well via the trade routes. And he turned Pimm's from, a London phenomenon into a true worldwide brand. He would go on to be named the Mayor of London, and he was knighted. So about as English as it gets. Through the years after that, Pimm's was pretty established through the world, not in the Americas yet. Like I said, we'll get to it. But it goes through various different owners and distributors. You start to see more Pimm's cups be developed. So this is Pimm's cup number 1, which is a gin liqueur. And there was a Pimm's cup number 2. There was a number 3, 4, 5, and 6 that were developed up into the late 60s. So number 2 was a Scotch liqueur. Number 3 was a brandy liqueur. Number 4 was a rum liqueur. Number 5 was a rye whiskey liqueur, which is interesting considering they don't make rye whiskey really in Europe. Turns out it was actually invented for release only in the Canadian market. Turned out to be very popular, so it did end up having wider distribution before being canceled. We may do something with that one day. And number 6, which is a vodka liqueur. Right now, only number 1 and 6 remain, and 6 was canceled briefly before popular demand brought it back. Down the road. So through the decades, the brand remains strong. It goes through various different kind of ownership structures, but eventually in 1969, it gets sold to the Distillers Company, which will go on to become Diageo, one of the biggest spirits brand conglomerates in the world. They own things like Johnny Walker, they own things like Smirnoff, they've got Guinness, they've got Crown Royal, so huge brand umbrella that Pimm's is in now. When they bought them in 1969 is when they canceled Pimm's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They did bring back 6, and apparently it's still around. I've never seen it. But if you go hunting for it, and it may be more available in Europe and it may be seasonal, you can still find the vodka-based Pimm's. But the gin cup remains. It was the classic. It's the one that James Pimm invented. And it's the one that clearly has had the most staying power through the years. In 1971, Pimm's becomes the kind of unofficial, official drink at Wimbledon. So the first Pimm's bar at Wimbledon opens, and it has had a Pimm's bar at every Wimbledon since, and now it's the official drink, much like the mint julep is the official drink of the Kentucky Derby. If you ever go to Wimbledon, you're probably going to be drinking some Pimm's cups. Last year, over 40,000 pints of Pimm's cups were served at the Wimbledon tennis tournament. It's reported that the Queen likes them very much. They're served in Buckingham Palace. They are about as English as it gets. You've got Wimbledon, Buckingham, and the rest. There's this whole separate history that more or less brings us to the modern age of Pimm's. It continues to be the drink of Wimbledon. It continues to be the most famous summer cup in the world, even though there are some others. But there's this kind of second history because there is a bar, the Napoleon House in New Orleans, which claims to have invented the Pimm's cup in 1940, which is about 100 years after it was actually invented. Nobody really knows how Pimm's ended up in New Orleans. It wasn't brought there by the British Empire, so maybe an American tourist went to Europe and brought a bottle back. Maybe a European, American transplant had brought it with them. But somehow, while the Napoleon House was looking for a lower ABV drink that their customers could drink all day without getting too drunk to buy more drinks, they stumbled upon the Pimm's cup tradition and appropriated it as their own. They did not invent it, but it's certainly the cultural home of Pimm's cup in America. So we drink it with Sprite or 7-Up, and it was originally made with 7-Up at the Napoleon House. Interesting little side note, 7-Up from 1940 to 1948 contained lithium citrate, which is a mood stabilizer, and they were selling it as a hangover curative, both 7-Up and the Pimm's cup. So it may have been the chillest New Orleans has ever been. I think people were having a really good time and keeping it really chill. And then in 1948, something happened and everybody got rowdy again, which also brings us to modern day. So that's the New Orleans history. The Napoleon House claims to have invented the Pimm's cup. Really, it was just finding the tradition and bringing it to America. And certainly, if you're drinking Pimm's in America, it's probably more because of the New Orleans version of it than the English version of it coming over here. So very similar, a little different. And that's more or less what brings us to today. Today you can find a number of summer cups made in England. Most are gin-based. That is still the kind of traditional thing. As far as I can tell, there are only 2 producers of summer cups in the US. We make one, the Sunshine and Flowers, but the original one was Green Hat Gin. And I did get a chance to talk to my friend John over there, who was one of the founders. And interestingly enough, when Green Hat sold to MGP a couple of years ago, there were only 2 things MGP was really interested in. They wanted the Green Hat Gin, which is one of the kind of OG American craft gins. Big shout out to them. And they wanted their summer cup. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't know if it's kind of undercover while they're working on it or whether they're going to re-release it or whether it's just not available around me. But It does exist, and I think MGP was smart to keep it, so I'll be interested to see whether I pop up anytime soon. And that's it. That's the history of Pimms. It is all over the world. It's unique. It's one of a kind. It's a secret recipe, and it is probably the only thing that you've had which does exactly what it does. And what does it do? It makes a Pimm cup. So I am tired of talking to you, I think this. So, as they say in England, I think it's Pimm's o'clock. So, some of you are probably wondering in your heads, Pimm's cup, summer cup, Max, isn't this a summer drink? Why are you pitching this in December? Well, it's my fucking show. I do what I want. Let's make a Pimm's cup. So for this, we will need a sparkling San Pellegrino lemon. Now, the classic Pimm's cup recipe calls for lemonade, but in England, the lemonade is typically sparkling. It's not kind of a one-to-one in the way we think about summer American lemonade. So this is really the most common and best substitute that you'll find in America, and they will use it in England as well. You need the titular spirit Pimms. You need some noise from outside to get in your video. A cucumber, pretty essential garnish. A slice of lemon, pretty essential garnish. We're gonna put some mint in there as well. And if you're doing this at home, depending on the season, you know, might not be winter when you do it. Summer berries, really the more fruit, the better, the kind of more elaborate. None of it's really used in the mixing, but it should be this kind of a celebration of freshness in the cup. So, pretty simple. Since we're gonna do kind of a little fancy cucumber thing, we're gonna start with the cucumber before anything else. If you don't wanna do this, super normal, just put some slices of cucumbers in beside the ice, either before or after. But we are going to take one of these little slim cucumber guys, and we're going to make the lovely little outside twisty guy. Easiest way for me to do this is to kind of drag it around with the bar spoon and see if you can get it to lay flat for you. See how long I struggle with this before I decide to scrap this whole video. Hey, there we go. That's pretty good. Ice goes around that, so you will kind of hold the cucumber in place. The other garnishes are a lot easier. And then, you know, a tall cup is preferred and normal. The recommended Pimms ratio is about 1 to 3, so 1 part Pimms and 3 parts sparkling lemonade. Of course, Sprite 7-Up would be a very American way to do it, so you could definitely do that. But you build it in the glass. It's not a particularly fancy cocktail like that. This is going to be one of the more simple ones that I do on the show. I'm going to do 1.5 ounces of Pimms, and I'm not even going to bother measuring the lemonade. I'm just going to top the glass. Maybe add 1 more ice cube to bring it to the top. I'm going to put my sprig of mint in and try not to disturb the cucumber too much and keep it pretty. And then a lemon wheel is going to be pretty essential if you want the classic Pimms experience. And I will say mint, cucumber, lemon, they're all super aromatic. So as much as summer berries are kind of part of the zeitgeist of how you build a Pimms cup, they tend to not add as much as these 3 things, in my opinion. So if you're gonna do just a couple, I would do that. And that's Pimms. I hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe, I guess I should say that. And if there's any topics you want me to cover in future videos, put them in the comments or send me an email. I'm super available, max@baltimorespiritsco.com. And I will see you on the next one. Hopefully it won't be 6 months from now. Cheers.
Maybe we could drink together. I'll make a cocktail, you can make it with me. Maybe we could drink together. I'll buy ingredients and teach you how to use them. We can get drunk in the virtual world. The drinks are awfully good and you don't have to tip. You don't have to tip me. You don't have to tip me. You don't have to tip me. You don't have to